Welcome to Alpha Wolf Capital. I'm Tim, and I want to personally thank you for stopping by. This channel is designed to help small companies, both public and private, gain exposure with potential consumers, investors, even partners. Take, for example, today's guest, CEO Jeb Besser with Modular Medical, ticker symbol MODD. Modular Medical is a development stage medical device company seeking to produce a next generation insulin pump to expand access to a higher standard of glycemic management for people with diabetes. This company was founded by Paul DePerna, which is the former founder of Tandem. Uh, there seems to be some confusion out there in the marketplace that there is a crowded space of diabetes insulin pumps. And while that is true in the higher end, more complicated pumps, it's not true when it comes to modular medical. But I'm going to let Jeb tell you more about that in just a minute. This is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not a certified financial planner. This is for education and entertainment purposes only. I encourage everyone to do their own due diligence. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Capital coming at you with a follow-up interview to one of my favorite stories, even though right now it's been going through a little bit of a tough period from a stock share price perspective, but the story hasn't changed. It actually just gets better. Jeb Besser from Modular Medical Devices coming in to give us an update on what's happening over there at MODD. MODD is the ticker symbol. Jeb, what's going on?
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me again. Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. You've had a little bit of a rough patch here, right? Recently.
I mean, I guess, this we've had a persistent seller in the stock since the clearance, which you can probably figure out yourself from the 13F filings. And we've been sort of working our way through that. And I think we tried to wait as long as possible before going to market. And we did an $8 million takedown off the shelf, which priced, a little lower than I would have liked. But here we are, continuing to make progress and get closer to a commercial launch or a strategic exit, one of the two.
So
Um, so
the one thing you can't do is you can't control everything, right? So
true.
what we know is that in the past, any company that has had an approved device, right, the valuation of those companies at that said time was no less than
$330 million.
thank you very much. And so the thought, I think, process was that if you got the approval, you would see an immediate reaction in the stock
Yep.
that would
Yep.
reflect
That's
something.
right.
Maybe you don't go totally there, but close.
That's right. It would start to get our cost of capital to converge with every other company that's ever existed in the space. And so even if we didn't want to raise capital at that valuation, we would at least have the option to threaten with it when we're having a discussion about do you buy this or do you build it? And not having that flexibility at the current market cap is uncomfortable, I guess is a good way to put it.
Right.
But look, at the end of the day, fortunately for us, our business plan, should we commercialize for any period of time, is wildly more capital efficient than anyone else in the space ever has been. Because as I said on our update call last week, there's no way in hell I'm building a 200-person direct sales force. I think that's totally inefficient, and it doesn't fit with the attributes of our product. We have, because our training time is 30 minutes, because we're targeting the 80% of people who aren't on pump right now, rather than trying to convert some of the 20% that are well served by the high-end devices that exist today, that are very, that provide better outcomes, but are feature rich, expensive, complex, and have issues with their form factors. I think we serve a very different market. And I think there's still a huge there's as big an opportunity there as there ever has been. But as I said last week, if you are a Me Too product trying to enter this space right now, things will go very badly for you. And look, and that's sort of exemplified by our competitor Invecta, who got a pump cleared 4 days before we did, and spent something like $300 million on their development of that device for the,
Which,
and that's a lot of money. That's a lot more money than we spent to get our
so
device cleared.
is it that are they privately or publicly held?
They're public. They're public. They're a spinoff of Becton Dickinson.
Okay.
And look, the FT reported in August that they were for sale, and I think the most likely buyer there is private equity. So if you're going to buy a 3% grower kind of supplies business that could use some leaning out, then that's probably, you're probably not going to want to invest in something that's a money loser for the next 5 to 10 years, trying to get commercial traction. So I guess my view was, regardless of how the clearance was going to play out, if PE ended up being the buyer, this was going to be for sale or it was going to be gone. And I think there hasn't been a sale yet, but it sort of feels like management is taking a page out of the PE playbook and starting to cut costs and looking at this and saying, and the CEO said in an interview like 2 months ago that they weren't going to commercialize it, they were looking to sell it. And I guess the news that they're laying everyone off means that they couldn't find a buyer. But that doesn't, I just don't know that it's that relevant to us, because, or it's relevant in that there's another player off the board, even with clearance, but it's not relevant in that the Invecta product was a one-piece solution, just like an Omnipod. It did have 3 mLs like our product does, which is an important advantage, but it was a you're throwing away all the electronics every 3 days type solution, but you're starting 15 years in the past as far as what insulin delivery algorithms you have integrated, what CGMs you're integrated with. There's so much to do, and you're talking about being, I don't know how many million man hours in process engineering time behind relative to insulin, and you're dealing with a competitor who's got a similar design to yours doing $1.5 billion in revenue. So how long is it going to take to get the scale for, to start to gain traction, let alone convince the market that you're better?
Right.
And
So,
better, and I don't think better wins in this space, frankly. Like as I'm sure I've said in prior interviews, if differences in pumps that one should focus on are not accuracy. Like, I don't think you can sell an accuracy in this space, because I have not yet found a clinician who lists accuracy in pumps as a top 10 problem, because they know that the biggest source of inaccuracy is the patient themselves. The patient's behavior in filling up the pump and pushing the plunger too hard and wrecking 10 to 20% of the insulin molecules. The patient's behavior in looking at the bowl of onion rings in front of them and guessing how many carbs there are in them and guessing wrong. And it doesn't take much of an error margin to be a bigger error margin than there exists between pumps. Biggest benefit of a pump is being on a pump, period. And being able to bolus with a button, and being able to, or a controller, and having a slow basal drip for 50% of your insulin. That's your 80 to 90%. And then everything beyond that is kind of on the margins. Doesn't mean that if you're working hard, you're not getting great care, and you can get that marginal amount, but that's not the main benefit. The main benefit is being on it's sort of like that old saw about cameras, right? What's the best camera? It's the one you have when you want to take the picture. And if you don't have the camera, then you're not going to get the picture. And
right.
and I think that's where the 80% of people who should be wearing a pump from a clinical perspective, who still aren't wearing a pump 30 years after they were introduced, matters. And that's still our market. And I don't think the Invecta product really was going to address that market. And now that the people have been laid off, like, to try and scale up something where you're starting from ground zero on understanding how it was engineered and why it was engineered. I mean, will someone buy it for $1? I don't know. I doubt it. I just think it's over. But this is why I've constantly repeated our mantra of, if we are the same in the way we market, in the way we position the product, and in what it does as all the other products, except for being a basal and a bolus pump, it's not a winner. The winner is be better form factor, be easier to learn, and over time, as you scale up, be less costly. And our product still ticks all those boxes.
Let me interject here real quick.
Yep. Mhm.
The thing that I hear over and over and over again is it's a really crowded space. I hear that, and then I
Yep.
say, no. Yeah, I mean, yes, it is for the complicated pumps, a crowded
Yes,
space.
that's right. Yep.
For the not complicated pumps, it's not a crowded space, right?
No, if you're trying to compete for the 20% of people that are on pumps or are, I don't know if you want to call them pump adjacent, but have been pump users and have rolled off it, et cetera, that's going to be a tough road to hoe. If you're going after the 80% white space that still exists 25 to 30 years after these pumps were introduced, well, that's pretty interesting because you're going to be going into a lot of places where there is no counter detailing, right? Like if you're detailing primary care physicians about a pump that's easy enough for them to prescribe, who are certainly going to be one of our targets as a commercial, if we're a commercial entity, those people never get detailed by pump reps. They don't get offered a pump because they don't feel comfortable writing them because they don't see how they could ever take the time to understand the ins and outs of the
In
product
order
and
to get a
teach them.
pump, you in the previous, prior to you, would you have to go to an endo? Do you have to go to an endo to get a prescription for a pump?
No, you could theoretically get it from a clinician as long as you follow the steps that your insurance company requires. You get a script for a pump, but then you have to decide which pump to use, and then you have to get trained on it. And the current training burden for the current pumps is a day to two at the beginning, and then a personal touch session a week later, and a personal touch session a month later. A process that repeats every time they upgrade the hardware
So my
with new.
question would be, how many general practitioners, how many would even want to go through that whole process?
Oh, with the current pumps, well, they wouldn't because they don't feel comfortable understanding what they do. They don't feel comfortable. They'd rather just refer you to an endo right now and lose the patient. And
Okay.
that's where, and so the opportunity is you can keep the patient and you can provide better care. And honestly, because there's so few endos out there and that number is dropping,
So
sometimes
I'm
referring
sitting
them to
here
an endo
asking,
sometimes isn't even an option.
follow me for a second. I'm
Yeah.
looking at where's the choke point, right? You got diabetes, you got a general practitioner, you got a doctor that you're cool with that you go see.
Yep.
You've got this other option that you don't need to have, right? It might be better for you, but you know the GP doesn't want to. He's going to have to send you to another doctor. So if you just tell me I got to go to another doctor, that's a pain in the ass in itself, right? Because I
Right.
got to go fill out all the paperwork and all that crap. It's just like that's where is the slowest point, right? So you get to this. The choke point is for the 80% is I don't want to deal with a bunch of steps and problems and all the, being trained for a day or two and then having I don't want to go through that process. It sounds like a pain in the ass, right?
Well, and that's not even taking into account the real pain in the ass, which is it's going to be 30 to 60 minutes a day every day for the rest of your life to manage this
Hey,
this complex device.
so there's all the choke points right there,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
Where you are significantly different from every other pump manufacturer is you have a very simplistic pump that any GP could write the script for.
Yes.
That way, they're not giving up their patient to somebody else,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And isn't there, for training somebody how to use a pump, isn't there what do you call it?
There's a reimbursement code of
Yeah.
$50.
Okay.
Yep. That's right.
$50 for
Fifty
50 bucks.
dollars. $50. It's about fifty
Okay,
dollars. Yep.
$50. So if you have a really complicated pump that you have to spend a day trying to train somebody, $50 doesn't seem like very much
It
money.
doesn't seem like it's very attractive, and then you're also there's gonna be paperwork associated with it, and then you're gonna have to come back and that assumes that you actually are comfortable training on it, right? Which is a stretch. And look,
So you
I'm
have
not,
two.
and Tim, I'm not the only one who's saying this, and I said this on the business update call too. Like Robert Califf at the head of the FDA at the ADA meeting this year said explicitly We'll never have enough endos. We'll never have enough diabetes educators to treat this wave of people who have this terrible disease. Therefore, we must push better care out to the primary care physicians in
Okay.
any way we can.
So
Totally agree. Totally
here's
agree.
what I'm saying. In that space, it is crowded, one. Number two, you don't have the medical field itself all raring to go train people on these things, right? I don't think you have a patient population that wants to deal with all of that.
Nope.
So this is the true differentiator of MODD, right? The true differentiator is you can train the general practitioner, you can train the nurse, you can train in a very quick and efficient so that they feel comfortable that what they're writing a script for is going to give their patient better outcomes. It's a much less complicated series of events.
It's a less burdensome adoption path for you as the user, and it's less of a burden for you as a user on a daily basis to manage. And look, if your goal is you're a 6.5 A1C and you want to get to a 5.5, you're probably not our user. If you're an 8 or a 9 and costing the healthcare system a bunch of money as a frequent flyer and is heading for long-term, much worse outcomes, this is a great option for you. If you're a temporary, if you're someone like, if you're an adult and you would benefit from being on a pump because you're on multiple daily injections, as I said, 99.9% of the time, pumps are better care than multiple daily injections. Probably, I mean, and I only say that because there's always some 0.1% corner case that someone can find. But I'll just say it's essentially everyone who will benefit from being on a pump. So, given those circumstances, if you're going to try and push care out, you have to change the form factor. You have to change the user experience. You can't try and be Omnipod without the integration and the scale, by the way, which is sort of what Embecta was trying to be. You can't be a rank knockoff because of the differentiation issue, and two, because if you are a rank knockoff, like the jury a week ago found that EOFlow was, and hit them with a $450 million judgment, you're that's probably not a good place to live either. So, but we remember, we pump differently than everyone else. We're a linear peristaltic pump, not a syringe-based pump. We're designed recently, so we reuse electronics that come from other industries. And by reusing the electronics, if you think about what you're throwing away with an Omnipod, which is clearly a preferred form factor for a lot of people relative to something that sits on your belt with 48 inches of tubing going into your abdomen, we're removable and we reuse the electronics. And by reusing the electronics, 30 times as much as you do with an Omnipod, because you're throwing the Omnipod away every 3 days, and ours lasts for 90. What are you throwing away every 3 days? Let's just look at the parts list. You're throwing away 2 proprietary silver nitride batteries. You're throwing away the pumping mechanism that's accurate to within a 200th of a drop. You're throwing away a Bluetooth chip, an NFC chip, and you're throwing away the system on a chip. All this stuff, and the auto injector, all this stuff that's in that pod. How? I mean, only by doing something different with detachable electronics are you going to be able to scale up quickly and match and beat their cost point. Their cost of goods point. And that's the other thing, like you cannot enter this space and say, I'm going to be a premium product because nobody cares. And we have one other recent competitive entrant, Beta Bionics, who just raised $60 million at a 500 pre a couple weeks ago. And their pitch is not that different than ours in that they say easier is better. So they have an algo that sits on top of their device that makes your user experience easier. The problem is, as far as them being our users and their users being the same people, is that their form factor is a 1996 mini med. It's got the 48 inches of tubing. It sits on the belt. It sits in the pocket, and it requires a 40-step process to change the cartridge. So it's as big or bigger than a mini med. A lot of people just aren't ever going to be willing to wear that. And their return rate, according to Seagrove, is twice that of other pumps on the market. And I think the reason that the return rate is higher isn't that the product doesn't work. It's that the expectation that people have coming to that product is, I want this to be easier. and they find that the burden is that it's not easy enough for whatever their expectation was. So those are the stats that we see within 90 days. But the other stat that I care about that I've never seen reported anywhere is like how many people are dropping off the current pumps in a year or a year and a half because they're just exhausted with how much time and effort they have to spend to manage this other thing. And so look, there are niche markets that we can go after that other players can't target, like gestational. We're definitely thinking about.
Can you tell everybody gestational what that is, real quick?
Oh, sorry. So gestational diabetes is when a woman is pregnant with her and develops diabetes as a result of the pregnancy. And so an inability to manage blood sugar, and it's generally transient.
And that's
and
important. Why? Because it could get transferred over to the baby.
Yeah, because the baby can have the same problem, and it can affect birth weight. It can affect glycemic control of the baby. It doesn't take much to see how you could justify the cost of putting a pump on someone in that situation for 3, 4, 5 months, as long as A, they don't have to sit through a multi-day training session, B, they don't have this expensive durable kicking around, and C, that you could do it at a price point that was acceptable to the payer. And I think the payer, frankly, would be a lot more willing. And I just want to say right now, we are not labeled for gestational diabetes right now. We are labeled for the treatment of diabetes for adults in type 1 and type 2. So, and this is a subset of that. So there's clinical work that obviously needs to be done here to show a demonstrable benefit. But this is just one of many cases where you could look and say, current pumps don't really suit this market.
And you also just got, we haven't talked since, we're looking at it when the last time, but you also, the GLP-1, got some data back on that, right? Recently.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, we're really excited about that data because, first of all, and I always have to say this up front, this is not a distraction for us. This is an opportunity for us to take this platform and apply it in other areas that happen to be very, very amenable to our platform. So the GLP-1 application that we're exploring requires, as best we can tell, zero redesign of our product at all from a hardware perspective. So it's an opportunity to take the unique advantages of our product, the cost, the ease of use, the acceptable form factor, and the large volume reservoir, and the materials that it's made out of, take them and apply them to a different market. And, as I've said ad nauseum, if you can tolerate and titrate up easily on a weekly shot, GLP-1 shot, and get great results, good for you. You're almost certainly never going to wear a pump. If, however, you're one of these people that, the New York Times just highlighted, who are unable to tolerate a GLP-1, but have explored have been playing with the idea of, should I microdose? Or is there some other way that I can attack this? And you're unhappy with the options that your clinician is offering to you. We think that our research tried to show that flesh out, could you get away with a much lower basal dose that was much more tolerable if you added a bolus around meals? Because the prior thinking before we read out the results of the study was that you would reach your maximally tolerated basal dose, and that was it. And if you couldn't tolerate, and whatever that number is, that's what you're stuck with. So what we saw is by using a rapid-acting GLP-1 that was basically delivered as tiny microboluses over a period of 28 days to a mouse, we saw 40% less drug at basal, and if you added a single bolus with a meal, and you saw the same weight loss with 40% less basal drug. And then if you added a bolus on top of that same higher basal dose, you saw 25% more weight loss. And the mice have proven to be highly predictive of what happens in humans metabolically with these kinds of drugs. So that's really encouraging, because if you're someone who's having a hard time tolerating this stuff, you could go up around a meal, come back down, and then if you can achieve the same results, that's going to increase the number of people that can tolerate the effect.
So my question to you would be, how many other pumps are there that have that ability with GLP-1?
Well, it's got to be simple enough that you could learn it like an auto injector, right? And ours is the only one where you can just push a button and get it, that doesn't have a big durable component, and that it costs little enough to make and manage that you could bundle it like an auto injector with the cost of the drug at current GLP-1 prices. So that's, but is, and you know, we used exenatide, which is the now generic fast acting first GLP-1 to be cleared, which as a 3 times a day bolus has a weight loss claim of 3 pounds in a year. So that's probably not going to get it done. But when we delivered it via basal and added the bolus, we saw much larger numbers, right? We saw 13 to 17%, depending on what kind of dosage we were using. So is exenatide, we might take exenatide forward and do a small human study, but there are also more than 100 drugs in development here that we know about. And that doesn't count all the other drugs that might be in some stage of development or might have been tried by the companies trying to innovate in this space who have no way to deliver it because maybe it requires more frequent dosing. So, but that's what you want here. You don't want something where someone pushes that button and now they're at that higher dose for a week.
Right.
You want to be able to tail off again if you've gone too high. And another possible application here, frankly, is that you could use this to titrate up more rapidly, because the current algorithm is you stay at one weekly dose for 3 weeks, then you go up to another dose, then you go up and you keep going up until you hit what you think where you're getting your, you know, what's tolerable to you. What if your that most effective dose is between 2 fixed doses? Like what if Tim's on 2.5 MCGs for 3 weeks and then 5 and then goes 7.5 and is sick as a dog, because it turns out that your maximally tolerated dose is 6 or 6.5. What if you could just turn it down again?
Right.
And then you switch to the dose that's appropriate for you. So then we'd be a run-in product. I mean, that's a different market, sort of like gestational, but it's another market where you would never consider another pump because of the durability, the durable medical device factor, all the different features that you don't actually need, et cetera. You want something that you could learn in a very short period of time, that's made from the right materials and has a big enough reservoir, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, for instance, the amount of exenatide that you need for 3 days for a human being, we think is about 3 mLs, which is perfect for our product, but insulin, it's 2.
All right. So let's look at something here. So you got approval, you get 510(k) clearance, right? And then you get
Yep.
but that means it has not been actually used on a human yet, right?
That's right. That's right. We were not allowed to do that after clearance. And so while we're waiting for the human use product to come off the line in Mexico, we're going to run a series of clinical trials to, you know, make sure that we've got the usability completely nailed. And those trials they're not something we're going to report to the FDA to try and change the label. They're not, you know, do I lose any sleep about, oh, the device could fail in those trials and someone could be injured? No, I do not lose any sleep over that. We you know, our device is safe, accurate, and extensively tested. What we are trying to do is make sure that we have the usability nailed for what, you know, for when patients are able to access this. And so the right way to do that is to do a series of IRB clinical trials with clinicians, patients who are already on a pump, and then eventually do it, you know, try to do a trial with people who are multiple daily injectors at an institution or two and offer them the pump to make sure that a percentage of them say, yeah, I will try this. And then they stay on it. And then we can show the obvious benefit to the medical system.
Okay. So maybe so you have this private company that did a round, right? And they're probably on their path to coming public, right?
Beta we think is likely to try and go public in Q1.
Okay.
Obviously, I can't weigh in on how successful they're going to be. They in August they announced they had 10,000 users.
Okay, so
So
that's
and
that's the difference
they've
between
raised
them
about,
and you.
yeah, they've raised about $210 million now in the last 13 months
Okay. So
to get 10,000 users.
so let me ask a question. In the finance world, for this particular kind of deal, right?
Mhm.
I would imagine there's probably a group that are geared towards this type of deal, right? that specializes in this field. Would that be
Yeah.
accurate?
You mean a group of institutional investors?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So if you got this thing going, right? How do I bring this?
Well,
Uh,
let me see if I can frame it in a way like where you're going, which is it's been a really, really long time since we've had a startup that entered this market and had any kind of success and traction. And Beta's pitch is similar to ours in that they believe that the problem is complexity and that we need to take complexity out of these devices. And so their device attacks complexity in a totally different way than ours does. They attack it with software. And the software allows you, if you're wearing a CGM, to not announce sleep, not announce exercise, and say small, medium, large, and enter your weight when you see a meal, rather than counting carbs. And then it attempts to learn how your behavior. And so there's an audience for that. I'm sure there's an audience for that. But you're still wearing a 48 inches of tubing and a big thing on your belt or in your pocket all the time. And
right.
so I think we're going after a different group of users who want to be able to learn the product in less than 30 minutes. They might have a phone with them, they might wear a CGM, but they don't have to in order to derive the benefit. They have our form factor that's much like Insulin in terms of its total volume. It's a little wider and a little squatter. And there's no big durable component to it. It's just the controller that you replace every 90 days. And so I think we believe in easy too, but we believe in easy in a different way. And I think there's an audience for both. There's plenty of, in the 80% white space that's ignored the current products to date, there's plenty of room among those almost 5 million people for another product to come in and get reasonable share. And remember, something like 1% share is a $150 million business for us. It's not a very big bogey.
Right.
So like I'm excited because like I said, I wish them all the success in the world because I think that news that 10,000 users and ramping is going to get you a valuation of, I don't know, like this last round was done at 500 pre. That's exciting. I mean, that's quite a bit higher than we're valued right now. I guess is how I would put it.
Right. And I
Yeah,
think that
I'll split the difference on this. Look, we don't have 10,000 users yet, but
right. And maybe that's part of the reason that the stock is seeing some pressure, right? Is that you got the approval, you didn't get the reaction in valuation that you would have thought would have happened. You have at the same time, unfortunately, this company doing a raise with a small group of institutional investors that kind of understand the space, which kind of ties them up, I think, right? At the same time,
I'd
you've
say
got
I'd say I'd say what I'd say the more relevant factor to us isn't that we lack for investors that can understand the story. It's still our market cap, our liquidity, the fact that we haven't launched yet, and then I would say the bigger hurdle for us is, I think I made it pretty clear that I wanted to pursue some kind of a process to sort of check in on where were the strategics in terms of their thinking about us. Are we an acquisition target now? Are we an acquisition target when we have 2,000 users, 5,000 users, 10,000 users? Or I dare you to prove to me that this almost pumper space is real and
right.
get some scale. And I think that the availability of the banks that have an expertise in this space that we would want to use for that has been limited because they've been involved in this other company's activities.
Exactly. Okay. And
So there's a freeing move here that happens, one, when we have a comp out there for the first time in a long time that's, having a little bit of commercial traction and they're doing it somewhere on the edges of this 80%. And we can debate how much is coming from like lapsed pumpers and how much is true white space, but none of that really matters, honestly. It's, there's a lot of room here. Um,
right.
so so in light of that, we want them to come public, and then I think that'll free things up in terms of us figuring out what our options are. But once again, we're not afraid to commercialize because we don't think that our commercial strategy requires the kind of capital that other companies have spent, because we're not a direct sales model. We want to have a few direct reps calling on the 200 high volume diabetes educators who drive most pump choice in the United States. And we want to use an indirect approach to target the PCPs who never see a pump rep.
Right. Right. So I guess, have you been active in the open market at all, buying your own stock?
Yeah, I personally bought 121,000 shares after the deal.
Okay.
Manchester participated in the deal as well, but I personally bought 121,000 shares at
Okay.
higher prices than the deal.
It's been my experience that there's only one reason why insiders buy, and that's typically because they think it's undervalued, right? And
well,
a lot
I
of
think that's
reasons
true.
why they
That's true of
sell.
all investors, right? All investors sell for lots of reasons, but investors only buy for one reason.
Right. Okay. The process. So the big fear probably is, if you're going to commercialize, right? If you're going to go down the commercialization path,
Yep.
you're undercapitalized.
Yep.
Would that be an
Yep.
accurate statement?
That would be an accurate statement. And look, clearly our current balance sheet does not allow us to broadly commercialize the product right now.
Does
Even
that
after this
mean
raise.
that Modular Medical is doing nothing right now? You're just kind of hanging out in limbo?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Aside from the GLP-1 activity, which has cost us a grand total of $130,000 to date. So I wouldn't say that's what's breaking the bank. We've got our engineering team doing things that would benefit either an acquirer or benefit us as a standalone, ramping things up, which is fixing the things with the device that don't require FDA approval, that make it more manufacturable and more effective. Preparing additional 510K submissions to add additional features without making it too feature rich. Making changes to the product, designing other features of the product that might make it even easier to use and lower cost, and getting that manufacturing line ready to go. And some of this raise is going towards the first steps towards taking cost out on that manufacturing line.
Okay.
Because that's always meaningful.
Right. So it's not
if you're thinking about this space and cost and your terminal cost of your product isn't top of mind, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet.
right. So it's not that you haven't started the patient trials, the actual human trials, or whatever it is, studies that you have to do. Not studies, but
Yeah, no, they're IRBs. They are clinical trials. They are technically studies, because under the Sunshine Act, I can't give product away.
right. Okay. So
And I want to make sure that technically these are investigational trials, so people are understanding that we don't have the full commercial line up and running yet, the product that they're wearing on their body.
right, but you're not just sitting idle doing nothing, and it's not because you're afraid that the pump isn't going to work, or there's none of that. You're being very strategic, and there are some things that have happened that have thrown some cogs in the wheel, but they're not long term. They're in duration.
I think they represent opportunity, and we continue to learn more and more about the space. We've had great conversations with diabetes educators at different conferences we've gone to, which have all indicated. I have yet to meet a diabetes educator who doesn't say, I have 10 to 20 patients I put on your product.
Okay.
That's really good pull. And I think but their other reaction typically is, but boy, the PCPs are really going to love this.
Right.
So we just have to find the right way to reach them, because that's a different audience than anyone else targets in this space. And that's a big opportunity for us.
And that's a massive opportunity. That's where that's what I see. I see simplicity. I see a way for you to get to those PCPs, and you're helping them become a more profitable a better quality service and a more profitable service for themselves. You're helping their business become profitable in an area where they're not really playing right now.
And I think that when you think about these clinicians, we talked to a medical director at a healthcare plan who said this would be so much easier to use and the results would be so much easier to teach and the results would be so much better than teaching someone as an adult how to use multiple daily injections. MDI might be cheap, but you worry about what the long-term effect is of having someone on MDI and coming back a year later and they're 20 pounds heavier and their A1Cs are all over the place and things have gone really, really off the rails.
Right.
That's not to say, look, if you don't wear a pump, it won't work, but it's much easier to learn a pump and it's much easier to have a lower risk experience with a pump delivering insulin than it is with needles because you're getting that 50% insulin drip all day long. And even if you put someone on a very simple algorithm of button sequences that's appropriate for them, that's going to be better care
Right.
than needles.
Right. So, I mean, look, it's the story, the underlying story of this. Hopefully we are making it clear that this is not a crowded space. This is a very different approach to a problem that exists for a lot of people, and 80% of them are not doing the best thing for their own healthcare.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yes,
so
that's
it's
absolutely
about
true.
education.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making people understand the real differentiator here.
Yep.
And to me, it's the biggest opportunity in the space. It's 80%. There's 20% that are in this space over here. There's 80% over here that just don't know. They haven't seen a solution. They haven't been brought a solution. They just don't know because they don't even know it exists, right?
Or they've tried the current solution, the solutions that have been on the market for a long time and said, this isn't for me.
Right.
People, I mean, the journey of most people who go on devices or consider going on devices is when they're a pediatric patient, and just to be clear, we're not labeled for pediatric yet because that's a separate trial and you need smaller dosage sizes. But when you're a pediatric patient, it's your parents who usually choose which device you're going to go on, if any. And their standard is often whatever it takes, you're my child. And to some extent. And then usually people stop as a teenager because it's so socially awkward to use the current products. And because it's a lot of work, doesn't fit their lifestyle, et cetera. And then they either return to pumping in their 20s or their 30s, or when they have a health crisis, or never.
Right.
Or they get diagnosed as an adult and then it's a much tougher road because they're just not, they haven't been playing with needles since they were a kid. And so this is all new to them.
So I guess here's my thinking. If a Medtronic or somebody out there, maybe they're sitting on the sidelines waiting to see how the acceptance is with the 80%. Maybe they want to see that. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, we don't know either, and that's why we'll, I'm okay with if we run any kind of process, I'm okay with any outcome.
Right. I mean,
there's no bad outcome for us. There's any outcome will be a trade-off between, risk and reward now.
People are looking at the wrong things right now. They don't understand modular medical. They haven't really delved into it enough to really understand why this is such a big deal. I do believe as you start to do those trials and you start to get that patient population recognizing how easy this is and how uncumbersome it is, I think, and the other applications that you may be able to use your pump for become more evident.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that's being missed here. And
there's also Tim, there's also a big market overseas where pump penetration is much lower. And in some places, pump reimbursement is excellent. But once again, you have to have a product that fits the needs of the market. And we're exploring that too, obviously.
Right. You're not, just so everybody knows, they haven't thrown in the towel. They're still working every day, and working on things to even improve the product that's already improved above everybody else, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
still looking at ways to improve the product. So
Sure. Sure. No, we want this to not be a starter pump. We want this to be a product where you can grow with the product if this is a good form factor and a good solution for you, which approximates your effort level, technical knowledge, and interest in making things better than they were on multiple daily injections.
I just look at it like this. You give the doctor, the practitioner, you give them an opportunity to serve their customer better
Yep.
by having a pump that they can prescribe
Mm-hmm.
that without losing their customer,
Yep.
doing the training and getting a reimbursement code for that. And well, I guess if it takes 2 days to train somebody on something, that reimbursement code of $50 isn't much. But if
Right.
it takes you a half hour,
Well, just to go back to that point, Tim, nobody does that. Nobody does 2 days of training and gets $50 for it. What they do is they outsource the training to the manufacturer of the pump themselves.
right,
So they don't deal with the complexity except for the fallout if the patient it turns out can handle it, but they don't make any money doing it either.
right. Now, if you've got a system that it takes 20 minutes to teach somebody, then $50 in 20 minutes isn't a bad deal, right? I
Now,
mean, it's not
the FDA claim is a 30-minute training burden
a 30
and
minutes.
a
Okay.
30-minute training burden on the label. We do have some data that suggests that many people can learn it in substantially less time than that, but that's our claim is 30 minutes.
Okay. 30 minutes. So $50 for a 30-minute consultation isn't bad. I mean, it's not great money, but it's not bad, right? There are a
Well,
lot of
you have to put it in the context of how much is the average diabetes educator or nurse practitioner making in one of these offices, and the answer is it can be something like $50,000 or $60,000 a year.
right.
So that turns out to be real money.
That turns out to be real money. So
Yeah.
there, like I said, a lot of things here that I don't think people are understanding. I don't think they're really delving in. I think they're just seeing it. Oh, it's another insulin pump. There's already too many insulin pumps. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yep. Yep.
that's true and it's not true. So what else? What else do you think you want to highlight, Joe?
I guess the only other thing we haven't talked about is, we talked a little bit about Embecta. I don't think we've talked about the EO float judgment. Did we?
No, we didn't. That's the
No.
one. That's the one
So
that was what was that?
So EOFlow is this Korean company that Medtronic bid $740 million for in May of 23. In August, Insulet sued them and said, they sued them for patent infringement, trade secret theft, etc. And in December, Medtronic walked away from the deal. I thought it was an interesting commentary on what a company that wasn't cleared in the US, that had less than 5,000 users worldwide, and had a product that looked a lot like an Omnipod might be worth to a strategic, because that was set. They bid $740 million in cash. In the complaint, Insulet suggested that 65% of the componentry was identical to an Omnipod to the point where it was the same colored plastic. So then Medtronic walked away from the deal in December 23. There was a 4-week trial in Massachusetts, which concluded about a week ago, and the jury returned a verdict of $450 million in damages to Insulet, or to caused by EOFlow. And so I think that's probably a $450 million poison pill, because they don't really have any operations in the US, but a $450 million poison pill to prevent anyone from thinking that this is another option where you could buy a knockoff Omnipod and bring it to the United States. So, our product is very, very different from Insulet in terms of its design, its look, its feel. We pump insulin in a completely different way, et cetera. Um, you know, I think this is another sign that, if you're looking for a patch pump to augment your portfolio in this market with Embecta shut down, with EOFlow shut out.
Right, so now there's two players off the board, essentially.
Yes, yes. Two players that I've heard a lot about have gone off the board. Neither of which I would say is they're both targeting an audience that's the same crowd at 20%, frankly. But they're also patch pumps and they're also not players anymore. So I guess that's the only other thing I would just highlight, that, the space continues to winnow down, grow in some ways and winnow down in others.
So what should investors or people potentially considering investing in modular, what should be the milestones or the key points that they should be paying attention to?
I think you should look for news in the first half of the year that we validated the two parts of the production line, the cartridge part and the controller part, right? Because remember, and just to remind everyone who doesn't live, sleep, and eat this product all the time, this is the cartridge. This is the consumable that you use every 3 days, and this, we've automated a lot more of the line. We moved this part of the line a lot sooner because we thought the FDA didn't have any more questions about this. And this one has to be much higher volume because you use 30 times as many of these as you do these, which are the controller. So there are two pieces. We've got to get validation of the cartridge, and we've got to get validation of the controller. So you can look for that. That's blocking and tackling operations type stuff.
Okay.
You can look for us to report on the results of the clinical trials that we're going to run in the first quarter, which will not delay our commercial launch. You can look for news of us initiating other trials as they roll on. You can look for other clinical data that we might be able to put out there, done by independent researchers, that might suggest our view of the market, that there's a big opportunity to convert multiple daily injectors is correct. You can look for international filings, because we think there are some international markets that can ride on top of the US clearance that could be attractive for us in the near term. And I think, and you should also look for, there might be, oops, back up. Let me see exactly how I want to phrase this. We're not opposed to the idea of putting automated insulin delivery algorithms on our product. What we're opposed to is the idea of putting an algorithm on that represents a ton of work for the user. If I can find something to start development on that fits our user, our projected user, and our profile, that will make life even easier for someone who's dealing with the burden of being a person with diabetes, that's something I'll support.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
That makes sense. As far as the undercapitalization issue, right? You just raised. So how long does it get?
Well, that depends on how bold I'm feeling in terms of buying things that are going to dramatically continue to reduce my cost on the production line.
Right.
So those capital expenditures, a portion of which we are going to take some portion of this $8 million and spend on that, because there is a lead time to having a mold fabricated and then validated to go into the line. So we're going to do some of that activity. We're going to do more of these engineering activities, and we're going to, we'll do a little bit on the reimbursement front while we're in this process, because that tends to have long lead times too.
What you're not doing is you're not going to go out and hire, 200.
Yeah, you're not going to see us hiring, 30 people and the former head of sales from Insulin or something like that. That's not in the cards right now, unless, that's just not in the cards, because that's not the way we're going to take this product to market, period, full stop. Right. And that would be true whether or not we had $100 million on the sheets or the $8 million that we raised.
Right. Okay. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, I personally think, I'm going to actually pull up your chart real quick just so people can take a look at it. Right now it's got a bearish formation from a technical standpoint, but I think there's some circumstances that, like I said, people are not taking into consideration. And technicals are one thing, but and fundamentals are another. And I think if they really start to do their homework, are going to realize that this is an opportunity,
Mhm.
a really good opportunity. Um, Hold on a second here. I'll pull up their chart and then I'm going to move this stuff over. Okay. You're gonna have to move your logo for a minute. Hope you don't mind, Jeff.
Yeah.
All right. And so this is where we're at right here. You've
Yep.
got this, can you see it? Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so you got this long, this would be considered maybe the pole of a flag, and then this would be the pennant flag that's forming. So this could be considered a reverse.
Mhm.
This could be considered a bear flag, right? So the concern would be from for the technical guys, if that it closes below, let's say $1.50, that would be a sign of weakness. But the volume is pretty much dried up. You had the volume that spiked a little bit here, not real
Mhm.
dramatically, but the volume picked up. It looks like to me one player, or maybe two players, but I think it's one player because you did mention the fact that if you go look at the 13, you'll see you could probably figure it out.
You can
But
probably figure
so
it out.
yeah, so you
Yeah.
got a player that decided for whatever reason, I don't know, that they didn't want to play anymore. That's fine, right? I mean,
Yeah. Mhm.
that can happen for a lot of reasons too. So I look at it right now, you're at a very interesting spot of potential price support, right? And I
Mhm.
say that because
Yep.
it was acting as resistance to the upside, and now it's acting as support. So
Yep.
that doesn't mean it can't go lower, although I will say this. Part of the reason why this stock was in the low price, it was because it's in the small and micro cap space, which for the last 44 months has not been a good place to be. I think I
Mhm.
just saw a report that small caps for the first time in 8 years are going to outperform large caps. Okay,
Mhm.
just like that's what's happening now.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yep.
you got two things that you probably want to pay attention to. The sector itself, small caps, micro caps, could be coming back into play, and they haven't been in play for 44 months.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't think that's a thing that happens and that for a month and then stops happening. I think if that happens, it's the beginning of something that's going to last in duration, just like the large caps being the place to be for the last 44 months has been the thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that the sector, and I think people understanding this story better. What is your risk reward at this level? Right? I mean,
Right. Yep.
I think the reward.
Well, you tell me, Tim, because I must think it's pretty attractive. I just bought 120,000 shares myself
So I say,
at this level.
is it going to zero? Right? I mean, that's the ultimate outcome that would be really, really bad. I don't think that's going to happen. They just got 510K clearance. They just got some GLP-1 data. I think there's a story here that people are not understanding. And when people don't understand a story, that creates opportunity. And where can this thing go? I'm not going to try and figure. I'm not going to call that one out. I know that it just was at 250 roughly. It seems to be
Yep.
a little resistance about 250.
Yep.
It can go much higher. How many shares outstanding, fully diluted?
So there are 41 million shares now, basic, and then we've still got 500,000 penny warrants, and then we have another it's $3 million 22 warrants, 3.8 million $22 warrants, and then we have 6 million $6.60 warrants.
$6,006.60 warrants.
Yeah, I think if those come into play, I think we're all saying, you know what, the stock's up significantly from here, so you're starting to get, that would be a high class problem to have
Yeah, that
as
would be that would be
resistance.
a champagne problem.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Thanks. Thanks for finishing up here with a Taylor Swift reference. I appreciate that.
All right. So look, this is what I'm saying. I don't tell anybody what to do. That's not what I do. I just present opportunity and good stories. And Jeb is a straight shooter. He's been a straight shooter with me since we first started talking. I love the story. I think there is I think there's a patient population out there that needs this. They don't know that they need it yet because they don't understand the product yet. But I think those things are coming. And I think that the 80% market is a much bigger opportunity than the 20% market that everybody else is targeting for. So I think Jeb is right on. He's on par with this. Could be an incredibly exciting story to be involved with at this juncture. So if you're not watching the story, at least put the I would suggest this. I could do this. Buy one share. That would cost you $1.66. And put this on your radar. Watch their news releases and see how they progress. That's what I would suggest. One share. That way you participate.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Stay tuned. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
All right, Jeb. We will have you back when you have something of significance.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right. Hold on one second. I'm going to turn this off. Thank you for tuning in to another CEO interview here at Alpha Wolf Capital. Today we had Jeb Besser, CEO of Modular Medical, ticker symbol MODD. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, make sure you smash that subscribe button. All of those things are very important to us here at Alpha Wolf Capital, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Capital wishes you the very best of success.